नमस्कार, आदाब, खुशामदीद, वणक्कम, எப்படி இருக்கீங்க? நல்லா இருக்கேன். क्या खेचो? केमन चिलो? என்ன புதார் साहिल किनी. आज ही तुमगेल मुका रबुन मका भारी खुश हत्तस. How many of you could count the number of languages I ran through just now? You're right, it's about 8, 9 if you count English. This is a lovely saying. How many of you can read this? Okay, quite a few. So it says, for those of you who can't read it, it says, "Kos pe badle pani, char kos pe vani." It's an old Hindi proverb. It basically means for every 4 kilometers, the water changes, and for every 16, the language. And when we talk about the internet, the story is really no different, right? If you look at the internet users today, this is what it looks like. We have about 125 million English mobile internet users. You know what that means? Every single English-speaking person in the country is already on the internet, okay? And the remaining have no clue what to do on all the apps that all of you are building. They don't have a clue. And guess what? We're adding 20 million mobile internet users every quarter. So guess what? Every 3 months, 20 million people are going to show up and not know what to do. Your conversion rates are going to go to hell. Your bounce rates are going to climb up simply because you're not speaking their language. This is one of the main reasons. 56% of the content on the internet is in English. And for all these languages, 130 languages, right from Europe, between Europe and Australia, all those languages, except for Japan, Korea, and China. These 130 languages, you take Africa, you take the Middle East, you take India, none of them, less than 0.1% of the content on the internet are in those languages. These are 3 of the top English newspapers in the country today. These are also the only 3 English newspapers in the top 20 newspapers in India. You want to guess their positions? The Jains have done a good job. They're at number 2. The next 2 are number 12 and number 13 respectively. The rest is Hindi, Malayalam Manorama and Malayalam, Gujarati, all these languages, right? So the demand's there. You build content for them, they'll come. Let's go to another news medium that's catching on today, right? This is the top free apps in news and magazines. This was yesterday on the App Store. These are all Hindi apps. They're not very good apps, but they have content in Hindi. That's all that matters. That's why they're on the top. Are you building for them? TV channels. We've got 1,148 channels. 102 of them are in English. It's a big number. I didn't know we had 102 English channels, but we've got over 1,000 in regional languages, right? Story repeats itself pretty much anywhere you go. Who wins? Of course, Sholay wins. It's a necessary condition to Indian citizenship, I feel. Should have watched Sholay. This is Bollywood's box office collections last year, 12,000 crores. This is Hollywood, in India, of course, last year. And finally this. Who hasn't received WhatsApp messages like this? This is from my family group. Yeah, family groups are not fun, right? But basically what this tells me is wherever there is an ability to create or consume content, the audience is already waiting. In fact, they're desperate for it, right? Here we are talking about apps and building things for an ecosystem, but we're completely in an English echo chamber. We completely choose to ignore hundreds of millions of people. I don't know how in good conscience we can do that. It's mostly because we've not had easy ways of doing it. Mostly because translation has been viewed, I mean, first of all, when you say languages, people talk about translation, and then when they talk about translation, it becomes this whole project thing. You go submit all your strings, somebody will localize it or translate it and bring it back. It hasn't worked before because this is a listing page of a very popular e-commerce site. This is the translation. Most of you won't be able to read it. But first of all, the first thing that strikes you is that it's not fully translated, right? You can still see that line in English. Second thing is the brand says John Players, and the translation says John Khiladiyon. Right? I mean, I'm sure Akshay Kumar would be proud, but hey. Right? Then Then there's the problem of over-translation in terms of, sleeve, the word sleeve. Who knows the Hindi word for sleeve? See, baju is the colloquial word. It's the right word. It's the word that you should be using. But you know what the formal Hindi word is? That's good. This is a Pandit here. So the word is asteen. The only way you've heard it or heard of it is? Exactly. So first time I saw it, I said, asteen, why are they talking about backstabbing? Aren't they selling shirts? So, so it's been done, but it's usually been done fairly badly, right? What should you do to do localization? What should you do to provide your content, your apps, your technology to these hundreds of millions of people who are just waiting? You can double, triple your market overnight. Your conversion numbers will jump. What do you need to do? Well, it's not that simple really, because to build a language stack, there are several elements, right? If you start at the base, and in the 90s, there was a lot of work being done setting Unicode standards to make sure every script was accommodated in the digital world. So there's fonts or typefaces, font rendering, translation, transliteration. Transliteration is basically writing the same thing in a different script. So the meaning doesn't change, the word doesn't change, it's just written in a different script. Translation, I'm sure we've just discussed, right? Then there's language input, so you should be able to type. And finally, search, right? It's the whole stack. If you don't build the whole stack, it doesn't work, because let me put it this way. If I asked you guys to take out your phones, go to the options menu, and go to language and input, and change the language to Cyrillic, can you navigate around your phone after that? If I ask you to, I don't know, set your notification settings once I've told you to basically change the language. This is what crores of people in your country, our countrymen, face today, and this is what we're putting them through, right? And we're talking about building the full stack. It's not been done before because full stack is hard, right? Building keyboards. This is a particularly good keyboard that I came across. I've been endlessly fascinated with Reverie, this company. I think they're building some phenomenal stuff, and I wanted to kind of showcase some of the stuff that they're building. So fonts and font rendering, they were the first guys at CDAC that actually built InScript and the Indic language fonts. And language input, this is a pretty kick-ass keyboard simply because it allows you to input in 11 different languages and also at the same time type in different modes. So that's transliteration mode where I'm typing in English and it's changing into Hindi. And that's native typing mode. And there's also one more mode, which is the Hinglish mode, right? You can type aapne and it'll give you a search, aapne aisa kyun kiya mere saath, etc., right? So let's talk a little bit about localization versus translation, right? Localization and translation are two very different things. And I think this video will tell you a little bit about it.
रास्ते में कोई कष्ट तो नहीं हुआ? खाना वाना खाया?
जी हाँ, भोजन तो हमने लौपथगामी स्थल पर ही कर लिया था।
क्या?
जी हाँ, लौपथगामी अग्निरथ से आए हैं ना?
ओह, ट्रेन से आए हो, ट्रेन से?
जी हाँ, अंग्रेजी भाषा में यही कहते हैं, परंतु हिंदी बोलते समय हम अंग्रेजी शब्दों का प्रयोग उचित नहीं समझते।
अरे इसमें हंसने की क्या बात है? What nonsense!
What nonsense नहीं, क्या बकवास है कहीं।
So this is one of my favorite movies, and it's a giant trip on language, right? Chupke Chupke, if you've seen it. If you haven't seen it, it's free on YouTube, and it's legal, so watch it, right? Great movie. But it stresses that same point again, right? When you're talking about language, the subtleties are very, they're inherent. And the way Indians, we use language is very fluid, right? Because sentence ke beech mein, I will throw in a couple of words, and everybody will understand. It's expected that we'll understand. That's how we use language, right? So nobody has actually built technology to accommodate for that until very recently, and I spoke to these guys. So why is translation so difficult? Content, context, domain. What context am I talking about? That's key to translation. That's key to localization. If I asked you to translate this word into Hindi, play into Hindi. Khel, you're right. Khel if you're sports. Bajao if you're talking about music. And I heard natak, if it's a noun, right? So if you are not aware of the context in which this localization is happening, the localization is meaningless, which is why a universal translation engine can never work. You know, this is a very provocative statement, but this is a statement I'm making after a lot of study and talking to a lot of people about this, right? The whole problem with Google's approach and the whole problem with this whole Astin Kasap approach is the fact that people are trying to apply, you know, when the only tool you have is a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail, right? So this is the whole problem with translation and localization in general. Nobody studied the nuances. Now, only recently have I come across someone who's actually understood this. I speak 6 languages, I'm learning my 7th. My wife is Bengali, which is I have to learn, it's no choice really. But language is something very close to my heart, right? And if you're talking about doing it, you have to do it right. This is the only way to do it right. You've got to take into account context. So maybe we'll never get an instant free text translation where you're typing an entire review in English and it'll change into Hindi or into 11 different languages or into 100 different languages instantly. But at least you can do the structured content. You can do most of it, right? And you can do it right. But frankly, the holy grail is search, right? If you're unable to provide search in multiple modes of input in a local language, the rest of it really doesn't matter, because all that content, how the hell is anyone going to discover it, right? So, and search, if you think about it, only works if you do all the others perfectly. If you do fonts, font rendering, translation, transliteration, language input. If you're able to do all of this, then you can hope to do search, right? So this is the whole point about localization. Unless you offer this, you're nowhere. So what does it look like when it's done right? Well, this is what I think is somebody who's done it beautifully. Watch this. That is tremendous. I can't believe they did that. And look, he goes to this thing, there's a little SDK and an API. You plug in. It's an STFC securities app, for Christ's sake. They're not the, I mean, all due respect to STFC, they're a bank after all. So what are they going to do? This tech running in the background is what's doing all of it, right? Search in Gujarati, search in Hindi, search in whatever language you want, and you can change the entire app into different languages. This stuff is practically witchcraft. Finally, I'd like to finish by saying local languages are sexy, right? What's sexy? So sexy for me stands for stickiness, engagement, conversion for the common man, right? So this stickiness, engagement, and conversion, what everyone's looking for, right? You don't want 70% uninstall rates. Why are you getting 70% uninstall rates? Well, have you paused to consider that 70% of the people that are downloading your app don't have any clue about the language that you've written it in, not the programming language, I'm talking about the script, right? Engagement, you talk about adding features, you talk about, I'm not getting enough people to use this wallet of mine or that flow of mine. If they can't read and all they're doing is shopping by photos, which is what's happening, by the way, how do you expect people to engage with your app, right? And conversion, you want people to drive sales, you want people to drive conversions. Again, it comes back to language. It always comes back to language. And I'm the son of a businessman, right? I grew up in Mangalore. It's a trading town. When you grow up in Mangalore, I'm a Konkani. That's my mother tongue, right? So I learned Konkani. English, Kannada, Hindi. English is lingua franca. Hindi, Bollywood, thank Amitabh Bachchan, right? Kannada is the state language. Tulu is the local language. Konkani is my mother tongue. Tamil is where I studied in Madras. So I speak these languages simply because, and when you speak to someone in their language, you touch their heart, right? You become friends faster. It changes the whole dynamic. It's no longer transactional, right? It's more sentimental. So if you, and we've talked about building for the next billion, and we've talked about your app having a personality. If you don't have languages, trust me, you're building for 125 million. If that's big enough for you, that's fine. But if it's not, well, you got to talk to the guys at Reverie. Thanks, guys. That's all I had to say.